Alrighty, good morning, my friends. It is Friday, May 30th. Welcome on in. Hey, Neil, how's it going? Um, we're going to go ahead and take a look at what happened here. It's been a little while. I was out the whole week before Memorial Day, and then we had the Memorial Day holiday on Monday of this week, and got back to town about midweek, and now here we are. So give me a second. Dry throat. So a lot of good things have actually happened here over the last 2 weeks. What I'll show you real quick, just what's happened in the overnight session here, just on the short time frames. There were some really good opportunities last night. If you look at when the Globex session opened here, which is that vertical line, if you can even see it on your side, started out, and we might have to move this so that our Hopal is not printing. But we came up, and that first short was a beautiful short right off the 200. Second beautiful short to the tick off our roadmap level. Third beautiful short right off VWAP. And then they came down, and what was the low of the overnight session? Pretty much to the tick, our roadmap level, right? So then it came up. There's that parry off the fast moving average for a little scalp. And then they got up through the VWAP to bounce and come back up. And then went on the more appreciable pullback, they missed that long off the roadmap level by 1 to 2 ticks, right? So some pretty good short opportunities off the back end of our moving averages last night. Two beautiful longs right off of the roadmap levels there. And now as we get closer to the open here, you can see they started to pull back. There's the tag of the back end of the VWAP and our Hopal that had printed at that point. And now as we come into the open here, a nice little fade right off the back end of that roadmap level where we found support earlier in the overnight session, and now a failure right off VWAP again. So a lot of good little rotations here just within the last few hours. Again, not trying to cherry pick anything here and only show you the best situation. This is exactly what's happened here just in the last few hours. So let's jump up to maybe the 60. Well, let's start with the daily time frame here because I want to show you two of the main areas we expected the market to hold below. And this was all established before I left for my vacation back on Friday of 2 weeks ago. So when the market was pushing up into this area, and I guess what you could see here is there's a whole week of price action here, and here's a whole week of price action here. So this is basically what happened since I left on the 16th right here. And you can see going into the 16th and maybe the beginning of the following week, the week I was on vacation there, the very area we expected to hold for the bears is exactly where we got a major swing high and then got a 200 point, greater than a 200 point pullback. So that's exactly where we expected the bears to jump in. And sure enough, I wasn't here, right? So when we came in on the 19th and the 20th here, both days holding that level pretty much perfectly, you should have known, my members should have known at least, that we talked about it on the Friday before, that this was a good area of resistance. And sure enough, you could have grabbed the 200 point pullback, greater than 200 points. And now you can see as we came into this week, there was a nice bullish signal going into the end of maybe last week there. And then as we came into this week, we've had a nice bullish recovery only to come right back up and get a typical peak above and fail retest with that beautiful swinger higher high on price and higher low on RVI, giving us a very clear bearish signal as of this morning. So still coming right into that general area and finding resistance. And that is, again, a very textbook typical scenario from a major resistance point, or vice versa if we were looking for a long, where we come into the level, we fail, and then we swing into it just a little bit. We get our bearish signal in terms of divergence, and then the rotation gets its follow through, right? So far, so good for that potential. Doesn't mean that we are guaranteed that the market is going to go ahead here and break through this major area around 58.60 and go ahead and sell off another 200 points. But we do have some pretty good clues in the market right now for the bears from this week's high right here. So I just wanted to mention that the very zone we expected to hold is exactly what's holding so far. Again, anyone's guess what's going to end up transpiring here coming into today, but it does print right now a very bearish looking pattern from that area. Okay, if we jump out down to the hourly to look at some of the more fine details that have happened here over the last 2 weeks, again, this is the area 59.8375. I think even everyone in the free broadcast last 2 Fridays ago, I warned you guys of 2 levels in the market that make sense to hold the bulls down. It was 59.8375 right there, which they came up to and failed just in front of in the overnight session. And then when they came back up on May 19th there, I think that might have been Monday of not this week, but last week, they came right into it. And there was a great short there right down to the roadmap level. If you look at the details here, you know, if you were trading this on short time frames, there's your short off the roadmap level. There's the pullback, and there's the long, or where you should have taken profit off the next roadmap level. You know, so perfect parry, push up, test the roadmap level, break it by maybe 2 points, come back, hold it to the tick, and then pop up for what is that pattern? We just talked about this pattern. There's the 59.8375 major roadmap level. Test it, pull back, bounce off the roadmap level here, and get the slightly higher high, peak above, and fail with a big bearish divergence. So that's what happened there at the beginning of last week. And then we got a 200-point pullback, which we talked about. Right, on that pullback now, if you look at some of these details, where did they come down to and find the major support for the bounce up to the test of that next major swing? Well, they came right down to the next roadmap level there, got the bounce out, and then we came up. And remember, that was a digression there. I mentioned 2 Fridays ago, at public for anyone to see, 59.8375 and 6,002. Those were the 2 levels. In fact, it was the range between them that made the most sense for resistance for a deeper pullback. So they came in here on Monday of last week, tested into that very range, even held the level perfectly there on the first test, got the pullback, and then what happened? They come all the way down, they find that support. In fact, on the way down, you can see these bounces just in front of this roadmap level and right into this one. So this would have been a great long if you were waiting for the test of that roadmap level. Fortunately, it missed it by quite literally like 3 ticks, right? But then they come all the way down and then bam, come into here for the bounce. And on the way back up here, they come all the way in. And there's 6,002. So just a couple days ago, if you tried that short in the overnight session, you got that same pattern again, or that same kind of situation, I guess, is they came into the roadmap level. It barely broke by anything there. That was like a 2-3 tick break. And you got the perfect short right to the next roadmap level where we got the bounce. So you once again had that short opportunity with limited risk from 6,002, the very level to the tick I mentioned 2 weeks earlier, last, 2 Fridays ago. And then you should have been able to target 6,002 right down to that next roadmap level, 83.75. Those are the 2 major areas we expected to hold the bulls down. So you got yourself a beautiful short of just under 10 points. And then what did they have to do? That we see very often. We get the peak above the level by a little bit. We get the big bearish divergence when that happens. And now here we are coming into this morning, and we've gotten a pretty decent pullback. 6,000 to about 5,900. How much is that, guys? Over 100 points from the swing high of yesterday, where all the bearish stuff lined up, and right from the very area we expected to hold. Sold off more than 100 points, and now here we are coming into the open basically holding 50% of last week, which is a good sign for the bulls, assuming that we can stay above there. Okay, so again, just some really great price action throughout the last couple of weeks here. You can even see a lot of the major swing highs for the day are right off the roadmap level. Pull back, we bounce just in front of it here. This pullback here comes right to the roadmap level. So if you would have bought the low of Wednesday, I believe, off the roadmap level, you got yourself a greater than 100-point push, and there was, for all intents and purposes, no risk on that trade. Maybe a couple ticks of risk, and you got yourself 100 points to the upside, greater than 100 points. And you should have known that you were coming up here, and you should have taken profit around 6,002 in front of there in case this very sell-off happened from that area. So you could have nailed the low and nailed the high of the move, and luckily got out right before the market went ahead and came right back to your entry here. So lots of good stuff happening. And like I said, as we come into the open this morning, we are finding support just a couple ticks in front of the 50% retracement of last week's price action. So if we go up to our weekly time frame here and take a look at what's going on, we do have a bearish clue on the weekly time frame from this week's high. So if price can hold below 50% of last week, which it hasn't, it's bounced above it. But if it can hold below 50% of last week, that 58.75 level, we start to get confirmation of this potential bearish signal on the weekly. And that's not a good thing for the bulls, right? So staying below 50% of last week, and then closing down below the low of last week, if that can happen here, would confirm this bearish weekly signal. So that's why I'm mentioning here, down on our hourly chart here, as we come into the open, if we can hold above 50% of last week, that's a good sign that we may be coming back to retest the weekly highs. However, if we hold below 50% of last week, it starts to give us more clues for a retest of last week's low down there and potentially lower prices. Now, of course, the caveat to that, that I pretty much mentioned in all these type of scenarios, is you never know if the bulls are going to jump in right off one of our roadmap levels, because we see it happen day in, day out, right? Here's the major swing low from back on May 21st, right off the roadmap level. Here's the major swing low from the 22nd, right off the roadmap level. And then finally they came down and right off this roadmap level for the major bounce of 200 points back up to the swing highs, right? So no telling what could end up happening if the market does pull back this morning. We very well could find support from one of the very roadmap levels that we have below. But holding below 50% of last week is our first check mark, our first clue that we may be in for a deeper pullback, right? So that's kind of the stuff we're looking at as we come into the open this morning. If you do kind of jump down the time frames here, if we start up, I think the monthly is just too zoomed out. You don't really have any signals up here. But when you get to the weekly, you have a bearish potential. Let me get rid of that line. A bearish potential signal from this week's high. This weekend, last week's high, whatever you want to argue, they're basically the same. Right there, our 3-day, which I rarely bring up, does have, again, the swing high to a slightly higher high. Technically right now, potential bearishness on the 3-day. Daily time frames got that very pattern we were just looking at. Swing high, swing low on RBI, printing a very clear potential bearish signal from this week's high. And then we have a 4-hour confirmed signal up top from this week's high that's gotten, again, over 100 points to the downside so far. And our hourly, I believe, agreed as well. So every time frame warned us that a deeper pullback made sense from this weekly high, right? We kind of have to jump down to our daily here. So from the weekly high, and we did get a deep pullback so far, but I do think this could be the beginning of a deeper pullback to come test last week's low there. And again, it doesn't have to hold from there. We could be getting we could be in the beginning of a deeper pullback here. And in this case, what we could look at is the whole push from the bullish scene back from the April lows, right? So if we were to look at the April low all the way up to this swing high here, remember your 38 retrace, your 50 retrace, they're now a couple hundred points down below us here. So plenty of room to get in on the short side and target into these more important fib levels. And I guess you could argue 50% is not a fib level, it's a psych level. But into the 38, into the 50, maybe even to the 61 or beyond from there. So those are the general ideas as we come into Friday, the last day of trading for the month of May. And then we'll be into the June months, which, by the way, is the beginning of the new set of roadmap levels. And we will, we're gonna be basically limiting access to only those who sign up for the S&P roadmap service. That would be either buying the quarterly package, which gives you 3 months for this upcoming contract, the September contract, or the annual membership, which will give you an entire year of access to everything. So that all starts here just in the next week or two. So if you are interested in being a part and getting all these, let's go down here to the hourly time frame, getting all these levels that basically nail the major swing highs and lows of these rotations. Again, not every time, but pretty often. I would ask you to send me an email, and we'll work out paying for the subscription. But I do want to have people reach out first before we go ahead and do that. So send me an email if you're interested, and let me know if you want the annual or the quarterly package, and we will go from there. So have a great day, my friends. We got about 7 minutes until the open, so we will leave it at that. Hope you guys have a great trading morning and a great weekend, and we shall see you next Friday for the public broadcast. So have a great day. Take care.